Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you all so much for being here today. Wanted to, spend a little bit of time before we get started. When we were doing our prep call, we talked about wanting to make sure that this panel was not just all of us up here kvetching about what we are facing, and really focusing on some solutions and sharing stories of what has actually been experienced by all of us and our friends and our people we work with, trying to navigate a pretty challenging time, but also being really interested in building meaningful lives here on the Central Coast. So, to start us off, I wanted to share some information that was first shared with me actually when I was doing a double presentation with Ken Triguero from People Self-Help Housing last year, and he shared some of this information, and I think shared that it was the 1974 number was actually what his father was experiencing in SLO County up in Atascadero. And what this information shows is really the balance between the average income that was happening in SLO County in 1974 compared to the average home price, and you'll see that the average home price was about twice the average annual income. And right now, thanks to information I grabbed from REACH and from the Realtors Association, we can see that that ratio is now shifted to about 9.6 times. And so to afford, you can see what's up there, to be able to afford a mortgage is a salary that is more than twice the average salary that's currently, or the average household income in SLO County. And if you also look down at the rent information, you'll notice that it might be pretty hard to get a down payment together as well if you are paying so much of your income to rent in your journey to try and save to be able to purchase a home here in SLO County. And so we're not going to spend too much time on all of the details. I think it's just helpful to know sometimes those numbers. I bet we've all been part of conversations where the things about millennials and avocado toast and things like that have come up, but really wanted to anchor our conversation in some data that really shows the different type of situation facing people who are looking to enter the market right now. So I think with that, wanted to turn it over. We can start. Maybe we'll start with Dalia, you can kick us off, but wanted to have an opportunity to discuss some of the misconceptions that you might have heard about what really is going on in the housing landscape, what is desirable, what are people looking for, and just all of the different things that people under 40 are having to navigate as they look to build their lives in SLO County. Hello, do you want to try this one?
Yeah. All right, we're off to a good start. Well, to kind of place myself, I grew up in the Central Coast, so I'm a local. I was raised in Morro Bay and Los Osos, and I had the opportunity to move back and start my career at People Self-Help Housing, and it's been a great asset to me to learn so much about housing, but it's also kind of opened my eyes to the insecurity that I grew up just even 30 years ago, not to give you my age, but it's been an experience just kind of growing up here and seeing the rising costs since I started my journey here, even at People's, but then going back to like middle school and high school. I think the perception of people my age is that we still want this traditional life of a home and that we have these double incomes. The majority of my friends, we are still single income driven women, and on top of that, we just want safe and affordable houses and even an apartment. I don't think we have this negative connotation that perhaps the previous generation did about living in an apartment. We value our apartments. We just want them to remain affordable and also be near downtown or be near amenities. And unfortunately, when we try to build in these spaces, I think that the neighborhoods kind of can look negatively on that. However, if we look back 30 years ago, a lot of these homes and neighborhoods did not exist. So I don't think we can move forward and keep the locals and keep the people that come here to learn and get an education from Cal Poly here, living and working in SLO, which is so important, without addressing the housing crisis that we're in, specifically here in SLO. Everyone wants to live here, but we can't afford to.
Michael, do you want to add to that? I know you see things both in your profession and in your personal life.
Yeah, definitely. What we see, what our organization sees and what we see is pretty much, it's a generational shift. The style in which our generation lives and what we choose, we've kind of gone away from the white picket fence, every town USA that was very popular in the 70s and 80s, and we enjoy multifamily living. We enjoy apartments, townhomes, more walkability and being closer to our community, being perfectly fine. And on top of that, we're also seeing our generation, we are getting married at a later age. We're having kids at a later age than any generation possible. And so we really need to see housing that kind of reflects that. And so 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments are pretty normal for 30, 35, 40-year-old young families. And the reality is, kind of to the slides was, we're talking from the late 70s to early 80s, we're seeing 10x of what the value of homes were. And so I've heard economists around here, especially locally, the way out of this is multifamily, multifamily, multifamily. And we hear a lot of pushback from high density or density. The reality is, to those in the room that have kids and grandkids, I'm sure you would like to be near your kids and grandkids. And it's not that our generation is just fighting to have a future here. The reality is we may be one of the last generations to have a future here before we turn into a full retirement community. And so fighting for that type of housing is a necessity, and we need all of your help to get there and to make it a critical point that our elected officials can hear that point, and work hand in hand with the amazing county and city staff that see that vision as well.
Jessica, I know that you with the Strong Towns group also focus a lot on that changing what it means to build a community with character where people belong and can really thrive. How does that play into your discussions about what some misconceptions or things that you feel like you're constantly amazed to hear, maybe?
Yeah, I think just kind of echo what other folks have said. People are interested in a wider variety of homes than currently exist in San Luis Obispo or in the country generally. I think I hear my friends interested not only in a single family house that's detached, but interested in a duplex that we can share with one of our friends. Interested in a commune where 5 people can live on the same lot on like little houses and have a little garden. One of our friends said they want to live in a cutesy little cottage cluster where they can live out their golden girl dreams. One of my friends recently had the chance to visit an apartment in the Anderson Hotel, which Haslo has renovated recently and is a place where folks are living again. And she was not even in our generation, but an older generation who said that she had always dreamed of living in New York City, and she loved that she could walk downtown, if she could walk to a restaurant. She didn't have a car and she didn't need one because everything she needed was right around her. And she said she had always wanted to live in New York City, and now she got to do that in San Luis Obispo. And so I think we have the opportunity to provide a wide variety of houses, all kinds of houses for all kinds of people, not just what maybe we're used to building or what the product has been in the past. And there's such a vision out there for what that could be. I think one more thing I wanted to speak to is that to the point on renters, most of us are renters now, people under 40. I think in the city we're 60% renters. That might have changed. So that means that the majority of people living in San Luis Obispo are renters. And right now it is hard to save up for that down payment if you are looking for a house because rents have increased so dramatically. Aside from rents increasing and being unaffordable, there is a long lead time for finding housing. We normally get an email, so a lot of you are probably renters, you get that email from your landlord in January and February that even though your lease is up in July, you need to make a decision. At the same time, you need to apply to many different places. They have application fees, they have showings that are only during the day, perhaps when you are working. And so it's a full-time job to be a renter during that period, every lease cycle, which makes it hard to save the time and save the money and have the time to look towards housing and buying in the future.
And I know that that's also really supported in the data from the survey that was just sent out to a bunch of people by the chamber. It came back that 75% of renters said that availability was one of their largest issues when finding housing, compared to 57% of those who are looking to purchase a home. And so I do think it is a little bit of a shift from what we might have seen back in 2014 when this first started, where the big conversation was about availability of homes for purchase, but maybe renting was a little bit more accessible. Now renting has, surpassed that in challenges just to find a place. And I think also in preparing for this, I was looking around, and studio apartments are actually have a higher average rent than one-bedroom apartments do, because they're so hard to find here. And that constrained supply, the lack of availability there, is one of the big things that's driving up those rental prices as well. I know, Michael, you were talking about like getting involved in all those things. And oftentimes what we hear at wonderful events like this and in other places is that, you got to get involved, have your voice heard, go to city council and board of supervisor meetings, get in there, beat the change, all of these great things. But that's a particularly challenging thing to do if you're at a time in your life where you might not have as much control over your work schedule. I mean, even just being here today, I know is a big ask if you're not a business owner or someone who can say, yeah, hey boss, I'm gonna be generally around the Board of Supervisors meeting all day on Tuesday, and depending on public comment for other items, I'm not entirely sure when this is gonna come up, but I really wanna be able to keep working for you and have a house here. And also if you have a young family, being available in the evenings and things like that, it's just really hard if you don't have that luxury of time. And so I'm interested in your guys' perspective, and I know you spend so much time advocating and sharing stories. Are there changes that you feel like would really make it more possible for people who are most likely to be hoping to inhabit new homes that are getting built, to make it possible for their voice to be heard in these community-wide discussions on urban planning and housing?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. And so our group kind of became known because we were really involved in the data reserve process. And we're very happy to see that that got approved as well. Almost 1,400 units, and much needed in Pomo. And we kind of thought about it of like, how do we get young professionals tied into this process, educated? And a lot of what our organization does is just educating people about the housing process. And I'm a firm believer, you get involved in just trying to get anything built or developed, you will become radicalized. You absolutely will. It happened to me. I'm very glad it happened to me, but it did. And so the reality is when you go to these planning commission meetings and these board of supervisor meetings, it ranges from, I've been at planning commission meetings, we get 5 people there, the planning commissioners are like, this is a record. And then we've been at the data reserve meetings to where it's 150 to 200 people giving public comment. If you feel for everyone waiting, sitting there, the board of supervisors, all 5 of them need to sit there and listen to almost 200 people give public comment. So God bless them for doing that as well. But the reality is there's those, and the messages we get, from the single mom that's working 2 jobs and is working 12, 14-hour days just to support their family. It's really an issue of the haves and the have-nots, because a lot of the people that are speaking in opposition to some of these projects are retirees who have 500% appreciation in their home. They bought their home for when they were selling for a sack of potatoes, and now it's $1.5 million. And so I always tell people, and the people who are just saying, I would love to get there, but I just can't, the smallest thing helps, whether that's just writing a public comment or emailing a public comment to somebody. And we have members that will speak for other people as well. But if you can just send an email when it comes to any project saying, hey, I support this, I love it, I want my kids to move back, just speak to the personal issue of what housing is. And we view housing, it shouldn't be a political issue, it's really a moral issue. People should be housed, whether it's the Welcome Home Village in San Luis Obispo, or it's the Data Reserve that's gonna house 3,000 or so people, and you're going to have generations that are going to live there and grow. Nothing bad has ever happened simply because somebody chose to build a home. Never happened. Never happened. So yeah, send an email, get engaged, but just that little email, it works wonders.
And Jessica, I know you've done a lot of community engagement on projects that you've worked on, but also might have a few recommendations for what local jurisdictions could do to make it easier to hear from voices of potential new renters and owners.
Yeah, for reference, the firm I work for, Architects FORA, we have a branch, Engage FORA, that does a lot of community engagement. So I've been involved both on the community engagement side and on the advocacy side through my work with Strong Towns. And I think that the number one lesson that I've learned in doing engagement work is that you have to show up where people are. So I would recommend, I know like sometimes meetings are 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and you have to find the city hall and then you have to write a comment in a specific way, but we show up at soccer tournaments, we show up at farmers markets, things like that. I find that those are really effective in getting a broader variety of people to provide input. We say you should always bring food if you can. That encourages people to show up, and it sounds so small, but it's so important to make sure, like for instance, if you're going to hold a dinner time meeting, for some families there's no way. For some families, they need childcare, and that can be the difference in showing up or not showing up. We normally have a kids' table with some Legos and toys for kids to play with that's supervised by a childcare provider. And finally, I would say make sure to clarify what's available for discussion and community input. I think it's easy for us to go down rabbit holes that the community might not have any say over. And so when we're really specific about listening to the community on the parts of the project that we can actually act on and show that we are taking accountability and being responsive to that input, that builds trust with the community versus putting it all out there and then saying, we were not able to do that anyway, I'm so sorry. And so I think honing the activities that are available and the discussions that are available is a really key point.
And Dalia, you guys, I mean, at Peoples also, there's so many opinions on the amazing projects that you're building, not only in SLO County, but across the Central Coast. Are there different things that you've seen maybe another community do or that you wish would happen to help empower a variety of voices to be heard as these decisions are being made?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I think like a silver lining of COVID is that we went to virtual meetings for a lot of things, and that's helped a lot. Like not everyone can dedicate their 4 hours that night to attend, but they can tune on their city council and just listen into that specific item that they're interested in. But along that, I think we really need to do some education as to why these council meetings are so important and let folks understand that if this item doesn't pass at that meeting or if it gets delayed or postponed or whatever that might be, you could be pushing back a project another 3 to 4 months, a year. And that's costs that we're incurring as a developer. And now we're just holding back affordable housing from actually being available for another 6 months, a year plus. So these meetings do really matter and they are significant. So I know I try to tell my friends like, hey, we're looking at this meeting, and they'll sit in with me just watching. And it's interesting to them because they're like, wow, all these people have all these opinions. And I was like, yeah, on like the most minuscule thing. So imagine like an actual housing project. Like there's so many thoughts that come out. And to just echo what they said, I think it's just important to get folks out there and encourage them to attend and participate and knowing when a project is coming up because to be honest, unless you're looking out for a project, you're not going to know that an item is being discussed next week at council. So you're not actively looking up an agenda to say, oh, hey, next week they're looking at San Luis Ranch or whatever it might be. So we need to be active ourselves and in our communities to say, hey, this is coming up. We should show up and support because I think everyone in this room supports housing. So we need to show up for the projects that are going through this endless cycle sometimes it feels like, to actually get something approved.
And I think just want to double down, always having food is great. Thank you, Covella, for being a sponsor of our snacks today. I think one of the things that you mentioned, that was mentioned here, is sort of clarifying what's up for discussion and maybe looking at some things that might be more of a staff level approval and things like that. But I want to open it up even a little bit further. If you guys had the great power of being able to make one change that would apply to every single jurisdiction in SLO County to make it, again, just more possible for people to build their lives here and have the stability, whatever that may be, whether it's through renting or owning. What sort of one change would you make? I think maybe Jessica, I don't know if you have a couple of ideas given all of your community engagement work, but are there things that you think would make it just a little bit less impossible feeling?
I'll start. I think the number one thing I would do is remove parking mandates across the county. I think this sounds minuscule, but parking adds incredible costs to a project, which can reduce the amount of housing that actually gets built. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, they removed parking minimums, and they saw the cost to construct housing drop by 20 to 60%. This frees up time for design, for sure, money and land space for people to actually live. And so I know it can sound like that is maybe far-reaching, but removing parking mandates doesn't mean that parking doesn't get built. It means that the developer gets to decide how much to build based on market demand, and it means that it's right-sized for the people that are going to live in our community. I think that this would go an incredibly long way in making more of our housing projects viable.
And I think, Michael, before we get to you, also want to remind you, everyone should have a little index card on their table. So if you have any questions that you'd like to have us discuss up here, please just write those down, and I think chamber staff is going to be walking around and collecting them. But all right, Michael.
Like I said kind of earlier, we have incredibly competent county staff, and every city in this county has competent staff, and they should be allowed to be given the right to process and approve things. And I will speak on behalf of every developer in this room because, I love you guys. Not one single developer wants to be involved in the political process of approving homes. If a property is CEQA exempt, that should just be dealt with by staff and should be approved ASAP. If an infill project for 60 units is allowed due to the zoning of that property, that should be dealt with by city and county staff. It should not go to any city council or board of supervisors. It should just be dealt with there. So having these developers' backs is a huge part of it all. And then, too often we see projects delayed due to the political process. And the sad thing is we can't afford that. We can't afford 6, 10, Jocelyn mentioned it earlier, 1998 is when a project was approved or started. That's insane. I was born in 1997. That's insane. It's crazy. And so we need to speed up that process because unfortunately we can't afford any more delays. And what that looks like for the economic vitality of this community when certain generations genuinely can't afford rising rents, rising prices to do that is there. And so talk with your city staff, talk with developers. They understand this process. All elected officials should be willing and wanting to work with with developers to try to get projects there. And every project should be leaning towards a yes and not a no. Talk with, I don't know if he's in the room, I haven't seen him, don't give away the Carolina score, but Matt Bronson's a brilliant guy, and talk with him to find out how economic vitality and what it's like to get people there, and support the politicians that want to bring housing here. The Doherty's legs and the Heather Morenos of the world, we love them, and they're fighting for our generation, and they're fighting for the generations to follow.
Dalia, I know you guys have had some experience with what happens when we get that expedited processing and staff level approval. Is there anything else that you've seen that could be really helpful and make a change?
Yeah, we definitely support streamlining and ministerial approvals all the way. So thank you for bringing that up. And then I always say, affordable housing, you need the time and you need the money. So we don't know what's happening at the federal level, so I really think this is a pivotal time for local communities and local counties and cities to show up for these projects and make the funding happen. So I'm here to formally ask, just kidding. but seriously, we can't build if we don't have the money to fund these and operate these, so we just need the money. We can't build housing if there's no money to pay for it. And I really think it needs to go beyond just inclusionary housing, especially here in the city of SLO, because we have seen those projects still stall. So I will work with someone to make a new pocket of money, if that's an open idea.
And I think actually just doubling down on that really quick, one of the misconceptions I hear oftentimes is sort of who affordable housing is for, but I was on people's website last night and the maximum income, household income to qualify for to live in some of these amazing homes that you guys are building is north of $70,000 for one person to live in these units. And so I'll say, as someone who employs quite a great group of people, it is an amazing thing to know as an employer that your best team members might be able to find a place that's affordable to live in a project like that, especially if it has a funding mechanism that's not reliant on market rate housing being built exclusively.
Yeah, definitely, and I just want to echo that. It is a lot of our working families and working individuals. All the rent limits and income limits are published, and like you said, it's on our website, but I tell that to my friends all the time. I'm like, you could live here. Like, it's not this idea that a lot of people like created somehow from past affordable housing developments. So I just really think that we need to take another look at who's actually living here, and it's the people who work at your schools, like people who work at the Trader Joe's, whatever that might be. These people need to live, and we want our community to keep thriving, so we need to house them.
And I think one of the things that we have sort of been talking about a little bit is those the wide variety of housing types that can be really attractive, and some of the density that you guys have been talking about could potentially be possible if there was a rethink on some of our height limits and places that we allow a variety of housing types to be built. But we'd love any sort of stories you guys have from other communities or things that you've seen that if we as a county adjusted some of our perspectives on taller buildings might become possible here.
I'll say, just to speak to the height and the density, I think there's a fear often of density, but on the other hand, we all love to go to Europe on vacation. And so I do want to mention that density is what supports the amenities that we love. Density could support a grocery store in downtown San Luis Obispo. Density could support frequent, convenient mass transportation options so you don't have to drive drunk home from downtown, but you can get on the bus and get home. These are concerns that have overlapping ripple effects throughout our community, and building denser helps us solve multiple problems at once. So I think that there's a fear of that, but we sometimes forget the positive side. And I think height also can provide a really valuable aesthetic experience. In downtown San Luis Obispo, we have beautiful tall trees that give us a sense of enclosure, a sense of shelter when you're walking downtown, so it feels welcoming and it feels safe. There's a reason we all love that street. And taller buildings can do a similar thing for us. So I think we need to look outwards and see what other people are doing and how those places are coming to life.
I'm a proud Paso Roland, so shout out to Paso here. Paso just approved about 3 people. Paso, showing up. Paso just approved about a dozen or so permit ready to go plans for ADUs. I think that's amazing. And I'm also going to go to something that kind of inspired that as well. Burlington, Vermont, shout out Lindy Hatcher right there. They're pretty much abolishing single-family zoning. So they're pretty much allowing any lot, at minimum single-family ADU, but duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, kind of the cottage style Jessica was talking about as well. We're seeing that all over the place. Housing is one of the most hot-button issues in Vermont. So to see cities kind of adapt policies to where they just have stuff ready to go, plug and play. Canada, the #1 issue pre-tariffs is housing. It's the most hot-button issues both political parties in Canada talk about. Canada just adopted 26 single-family home duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, but 26 different plans that can be plugged into pretty much every jurisdiction in Canada to get homes streamlined, built quickly, and just ready to go. You just got to cut the check. So, cities, adopt that.
Dalia, are there things that you guys have seen in your building all across the Central Coast, not just in SLO County, that make you think that something other than the challenges we're experiencing here might be possible?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to say that we typically only build up to 3 stories. So if any city wants to let us go higher, that would be great. Because the higher you go, the more dense you are. And density creates more housing. Therefore, that's the only way we'll solve this actual housing crisis. So.
And I know that one of the things that Jocelyn sort of teed up for us here is, hey, we've been building all of this amazing housing. Do we still have a housing crisis? But remember, a wonderful conversation with Steve Peck a couple of years ago, looking into the human density, not just the housing density that our communities are experiencing. And as we're talking about here, sort of typical family structures are a little bit different than they might have been 20 years ago. And so a density of housing and of units doesn't necessarily equate to a density of humans. And so some of the concerns around that space, whether it's traffic or parking or other things like that, can be a little bit misleading if you have this idea of who occupies a home being that, like, leave it to Beaver space, which is lovely, but in your mind is sort of that's what is going to have to cram into a studio apartment or a 6-story building or something like that. But everything that you guys have been sharing is really focused on wanting community and wanting to build character. And I think that's really an important thing to consider. So much of the challenges and concerns that I know I have heard across different communities on the Central Coast is that new homes and new housing and different types of things will somehow hurt our community character. But that's not sort of what you guys are sharing at all. Are there conversations that you've had either with people who maybe have come to understand things differently or who you're hopeful might evolve the way that they see new neighbors in our community?
Okay. Yeah, things are going to change, but things have always changed, so that's great news for everyone. I think it's up to us, like, change is going to happen regardless, so it's up to us if our neighborhoods become more diverse and more inclusive and more affordable, or if they become more expensive and more exclusive, right? And so it can go either way, and it's up to us to decide how we want that to be. I encourage you all to find your favorite building wherever it is that you live, or your favorite neighborhood, or your favorite street, and look at the types of housing that is already there, because there's a lot of inspiration right here in this county, and a lot of things that we used to build, we don't build anymore. So if we can collect lessons and look towards what that might shape our places to look like tomorrow, I think that we can help kind of quell fears and instead encourage and inspire.
Change is inevitable, as she said. Yeah, I'll piggyback on what she was saying there. Of just, we all have a say of what we want our community to kind of look like. It's going to grow, and that's a good thing. Going back to just what density pays for. That's going to pay for the roads. That's going to pay for better education for your kids if they're in the school district as well. But the future must look like the future, and we can't deny the future. It's going to happen. And we can't say that staying the same forever is a good thing. It's not. It's just going to drive prices up, and it's going to make the reality of living here much harder. Krista Jeffries, I don't know if she's in the room, one of the greatest housing warriors this area has seen. She had a great line at public comment once of, it's not a brag to say that it's been the same forever. That's like telling your partner, man, I'm glad you haven't changed in 40 years. You're perfect as you are. That's not a brag. We need to continue to grow, and we can build really cool things. And we have a say in what those really cool things are going to be. And so talk with your developers, talk with your city council members. That's what it all comes back down to. And you get to have a say in what that future gets to look like.
Just to wrap up that thought, on the development side, I do think it's an education and conversation opportunity, especially with what we build, which is strictly affordable housing, because a lot of, I'll say it, the older generations don't necessarily have an understanding of what we're building and for whom we're building for. So we always welcome anyone to attend our grand openings. Those always stick with me because we have an opportunity for an actual resident to kind of chime in and tell us, hey, this is where I was and this is where I am now. And it all ties back to they just want a safe, affordable place to live. So that's my spiel on Peoples, but we really do just want to make the community better and make it more accessible. Like, everyone wants to live here. Like, how lucky are we that everyone wants to live here?
One of the questions that we got was, does our public transportation and connection across cities prohibit people from accessing more housing options? And so I think really just opening up that conversation that you started, Jessica, with the connection between transportation and housing. I know we were talking a little bit earlier that we're not just building boxes, like this is we're trying to have humans be able to live here, and it's the people that we're considering, and so transportation naturally becomes part of that conversation. What are some of the barriers that you guys see in that?
Just because we work on this a lot at Strong Towns, I can take the first pass. I mean, transportation and housing are directly linked. The ways that we fund our transportation is through how many people ride transportation, and people don't ride transportation if they have to drive everywhere. So it's a little bit cyclical, but it's to a certain extent we have to invest in our transportation so people can continue to ride it. San Luis Obispo did a great job with a line that they have running from Cal Poly to the farmers market on Thursdays that was so successful that they extended it. And many of the students that I get to interact with, I also teach at Cal Poly, that's their line. They ride that line all the time. They don't have cars, and that then funds further transportation in our city. I think SlowCog is doing a really great job of assembling kind of a map and network of what future transportation opportunities look like and how that intersects with housing. We saw that in the Bay Area with their transportation developments, and their transportation-oriented development has allowed a lot of housing to grow, again, with less parking, which means that there's more housing, and those people don't need the cars because the transportation is growing alongside it. So there's a lot of synergy between the two that I think helps to feed one another.
I think if there's anything else on that, one of the other questions that we got was asking for a little bit more information on Strong Towns and on Generation Build. Are these membership organizations? Do these have bouncers? How can someone be a part of it? What are the requirements to get involved?
We had to let our bouncer go. It's getting rough. Generation Build, we are a grassroots organization. Our main goal, I kind of said it 6 times, I feel like, connect elected officials with developers, supported by the grassroots, us, to build an amazing community, continue to build an amazing community for the generations to follow. You can follow us at Generation Build on Instagram. Please do. That's the best way to find out how to get involved with us. But we are pushing for housing. We're pushing for a community that's more engaged, in a community that enjoys itself. If we grow, that's not a bad thing whatsoever. What makes the Central Coast great are the people. It's the however many people are in this room. That's what makes our community great, and I think it's a good thing when more people can experience that. And for those people, our generation that want to stay here, we really want to stay here. This is an awesome place to live, and so to allow housing to keep this generation and the generation to follow to stay there.
Sure, I'm here repping Strong Towns Slow today. Strong Towns is a national nonprofit, and we are a local conversation chapter. My co-lead is Hans Hirschberger. He's not here today, but started the group about a year ago. We're focused on hyper-local advocacy to build stronger communities. And so what that looks like for us in San Luis Obispo is focusing a lot on affordable and housing stock, enough housing, and also things like active transportation, walkability, and community building. This feeds into smart city planning and things like that. So we cover a lot of planning issues and a lot of housing issues and a lot of transportation. So our members are wide-ranging. They're bikers, they're students, they're planners, they're people who just walk downtown and like it. And if you want to join us, you can follow us at Strong Towns Slow. You can also come to our meetings. You can join our newsletter. Talk to me if you want to be on our newsletter. And we're having an event next Tuesday at the Meadow Park building if you would like to come chat housing with a bunch of community orgs.
I love it. It wasn't in the question, but I'm going to give a little plug to Building a Better Slow as well, which is a very fun little lecture series that a number of us in the room here put on. There's one actually tonight down at the Penny in Slow if you want to come talk about resilient communities. This next question, I'm going to apologize to the person if I don't get it 100% right, but it says, I'm a second generation in Slow, and my daughter wants to stay here and work here as a Cal Poly graduate, and she has chosen not to have children due to costs. If more young people think this way, there might be a huge economic impact. And so I'm interested, maybe not to get too personal, but if there are conversations or things that you feel like are also, because of the challenging housing market, that are shifting how people see their lives and what that will include, because of the challenge it is to live here and to really put down roots.
It's, I'm going to guess all three of us have gone to going away parties, which that's a sad party, but it's, saying bye to good friends, people you grew up with as well. Yeah, it is a sad reality that we're dealt with. It's either stay here and then make decisions that are based financially and based on one, the quality of life when it comes to either, pushing off getting married, pushing off having kids, having 4 roommates. I saw that there was I believe a 4 or 5 bedroom home near Cal Poly with an ADU, $18,000 a month in rent for all of that. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. That's unbelievable. And so, that's what we see. And so it's either, they decide that, hey, I want to have that true American life that we should all be able to have the option of having, but the reality is that's not a viable option for so many, if not the overwhelming majority of our generation. So they move to, wherever it's gone over the last few years. Tennessee, Texas, Florida, Nevada, the Carolinas, all amazing, beautiful places, but I'm sure they all want to stay here. And what that looks like is we're losing an entire workforce of, let's call it everyone who's 35 and under, that's just not going to be here. And what does that look like when all of those people are leaving? And when you see the amount of jobs on Indeed that aren't being filled, well, the cost of living here is so high, it doesn't make sense to take that job when I can get paid very similarly, and my cost of living is 4 times less in Nevada, Texas or so than it is here. And so it's unfortunate that those really hard life decisions have to be made because of an issue that we created.
I resonate with whoever asked that question, and your daughter specifically, because myself and my circle of friends, we have this conversation, and I don't think generations before us had to. Like, we really have to look at, can we actually afford to have a kid? Like, no, we can't. Like, especially if we want to live here, we can't afford the daycare costs. A lot of us are still single, and mostly because we were afraid of a little bit trying to tie down our roots here. Like, it's really hard to establish a foundation here, and if you want to have a family. So I empathize with you because I am in similar shoes. I feel that way, and my friends feel that way. We have to look at what our lives will look like, and it's difficult because we would want to live here and maybe perhaps do other things, but because of our choice to live here, our cost of living is so high. So we choose to go out to dinner and drinks, and we choose to travel, and we choose to spend on a reliable car. Like, these are costs that we absorb, so that kind of, if you want to live not in a financial like deficit every month, we can't imagine even adding a child or a mortgage onto that. Like, it's just not even an option for us. Like, it's not something we foresee in our future. So I do sympathize for her, and I think it's a bold step that she made that decision, and I really do hope she finds a safe place to live here.
And I think that was also supported in some of, again, the survey data that came out. Back in 2016, the first time the Chamber did this survey, 31% of people that were currently renting said that they were looking to purchase in the next 2 years. But the survey that was done this year, that number halved to just 15%. That there's not like that optimism of even being able to get that foothold. Jessica, I'm not sure if it's something else that you guys are seeing.
I think that speaks to, like, they did a good job of covering it. I think the one thing I'll add from my experience is, like, I work 2 jobs, right? I'm an architect, I'm a licensed architect, and I work as a professor at Cal Poly, or I teach second-year architecture studios. And I qualify for affordable housing at Peoples. I actually worked with Donna to maybe look at if I should apply to affordable housing here. And that's not sustainable for people. My friends are living like 4 well-qualified engineers with grad degrees in one house because the cost of living has gone up so high. And I think when we talked about rental and like the fact that there's not that many rentals, like the stock is scarce. It's hard to find places. It's not necessarily that we need more rentals or we need more landlords to buy houses so we can rent, but it's like if those houses were not owned by people who didn't live in them, they would free up housing for people who do want to buy, who maybe were in that 31% 2 years ago, but now haven't seen any stock, so have given up on that hope. It's not that there aren't buyers out there, it's that the prices have gone so far past what people are able to afford.
All right, thank you. I know it's a little bit of a downer note, but I promise the other panels and speakers are going to provide so much hope for what we're all facing up here. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives.